We talked earlier about the hands and arms operating like a lever system and that the body controls the movement of that lever to some extent or stabilises it. Let's have a look now at exactly how the hands and arms operate as a lever system. So when the club swings back, as soon as I've got some movement through my wrists here, I've got a hinge point. Now, if I was to swing the club back and through with my arms straight, it wouldn't generate a whole lot of club head speed or power. But as soon as I allow the wrists to bend or to hinge, it creates like a secondary lever. And then as that secondary lever is straightening out, the club head is going to gain speed much more rapidly, so that when I meet the ball, if I time it correctly, which is what we're going to talk about, then I'm going to be able to create more power in the shots that I'm hitting. So how do we go about doing that? So first of all, as the club swings back, my wrists are going to bend from about where they are here at address, so there's already a little bit of a bend from my wrist and my arm, so my arm and the club are not in a straight line. When I get back to the top of the swing, my wrists are going to bend about that much. So it's not a whole lot. When we look from front on and we watch how that movement occurs as the club goes back, we get to here, and it sort of looks like my lead arm and my club form roughly a 90-degree angle. As the club swings down, that angle is going to straighten back out to being somewhere where it was at the start of my swing. Now the key thing for me is that that angle doesn't straighten out too soon. So as I start my downswing, if I'm holding the club, let's do a couple of drills here. If I hold the club just in my right hand, let the club go back to the top of the swing, and then from here, the fact that my hand's loosened doesn't matter. If I allow my arm and the club literally to fall, so I'm not going to do anything with my hands and arms, are completely passive, the club will naturally straighten out and then swing past my hand as it goes through. So as the club swings down, we can see the club is definitely moving past my hand. And again, that's just the motion of the lever rather than me doing something with my hands. I could do the same thing with my left. So from here, as the club swings down, this is passive, but as my body turns, the club will naturally swing through and straighten out. So I want that movement to occur without too much manipulation from my hands and my wrists. So when you start your downswing, feel like from here, you're pretty much in neutral. So as the club swings down, there's no tension in my arms or hands, but there's very little change at my wrists here as I start down. As I get down near the ball, then it will naturally change very quickly because of the changing speeds of my body and my arms. Again, we won't worry too much about the detail of that. We'll talk a little bit more in the module on sequencing. But for now, let's just get the feel with no work from the hands of how the club is going to catch up and straighten up with the arms. Really good drill is to get a tee probably a little bit lower than this one and then just hit the ball with one hand. So even though this tee is a little bit higher than what we want, we can still practice that movement again. We're doing it without putting any force whatsoever. So I'm just getting the feeling of my arm and my hand just working very, very freely. And you'll find that after a few practices, you can actually strike the ball quite okay just with one hand. And you will get that sense as the club gets down near the ball that it really starts to gather speed quite quickly. If you think of the analogy of using a hammer, you'll bring your arm down, your arm will slow, and then the hammer goes. Rather than you don't use your hand so much when you're using a hammer. This is the same thing. They're both lever systems. So this is the critical point. As the club swinging down is at impact, we want the shaft and the left arm, the lead arm, to be pretty straight. They're only going to be straight at that point. So the club's trailing my left arm, and I'm timing it so the club is now in line with my arm, and then of course the club is going to pass and keep going. So the more I allow the club to swing freely, the easier it is to allow that, or to correctly do that. As the club swings down, the freer that movement, the more likely it is that it'll be in line at impact. So I'm timing that movement. If I use my hands, it's likely to be mistimed, and then I'll get all sorts of variety with my impact. So make those practice swings at different speeds. Note where the club meets the ground. Remember the drill we did with the chalk line there? So we can still do that same drill with a chalk line, feeling the timing of the movement that allows the club to meet the ground in the correct spot. If my hands suddenly start to do some work, I'm going to get a massive variation in how the club meets the ground. So the practice drill for the moment is work through good setup, allow the body to turn freely, but now we're focused mostly on that lever system. Get the feeling of how the wrists will bend through the natural turning of your body and swinging of your arms. The club will straighten out to be more in line with your arms, and then it'll keep going. And we're timing that so that it meets the ground at the correct spot. Once you've got that movement with the arms and hands, and combine that with what we've already learnt about the body, you'll find that suddenly a lot of the shots that you've been hitting in the past disappear. The poor shots I'm talking about. So you're going to hit more and more good ones. And you can practice this with short shots, medium length shots, and full shots. And we'll have a look in later modules at how it applies specifically with different clubs. But practice that. This is key. So now we've got control of the club face, we've got control of the shaft of the club, we've got control of the body. It is a lot. When you're practicing, remember what we talked about earlier in the practice module, that we want to take short practice sessions where you might have like 1 or 2 focus points. And it's quite okay to shift those around as you're practicing. So don't try and think about 10 things at once. Limit it to 1 or perhaps 2 things. And then you might change those for a different session. And trust that over time, all of this starts to come together, which it will. So for the moment, with this, we're looking to just get the feel of how that lever system's operating, and then having it operating on the correct path.